Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick, easy, I hope it's easy, question for you. Do taxpayers deserve an SBA that is transparent and accountable to Americans in how it spends their money?
Yes, sorry.
That's great. Thank you. I do agree with that as well. And your office has received recommendations from both the Inspector General and the GAO on both PPP and COVID idle, many of which are pretty common sense, including continually assessing the COVID idle program and developing portfolio-level data analytics to help identify fraudulent loans and fraud risk factors. Yet these recommendations and others have remained open for more than a year while watchdogs have identified billions in fraud and law enforcement prosecutes fraud case after fraud case. And I've heard from a lot of Iowans who said that PPP and COVID idle loans were helpful for them in the early days of the pandemic. But when we listen to Inspector General Ware, he's right when he says that PPP and COVID idle have unprecedented levels of fraud. So it has been helpful, but there's a lot of fraud ongoing in these programs. And we've all seen this story about the BMW with the license plate PPP loan. You know, this is Manhattan in New York. And we've seen so many of these cases. I don't think the program was there for folks to buy brand new Beamers. But as the programs are winding down and they're shifting to the fraud identification phase, I am concerned that it seems everybody cares about fraud mitigation and prosecution except maybe the folks in your office. And we really need the SBA to step up on this. So will you commit to implementing each of the recommendations the OIG and GAO have made to your office so that we can actually limit the waste, the fraud, and the abuse of our taxpayer funds?
Yes, and we have. So what Inspector Ware also mentioned in his testimony specifically is that under the Biden-Harris administration, we have made great progress on the items you've identified. Specific to the COVID idle program, there was, and what I'm going to do is list the choices made in the previous administration during 2020 that were not in place, and these changes were made in 2021 by the Biden-Harris administration. First, verifying business address. There is an easy, fast, speedy way to verify U.S. postal address through API. They did not do that. IP static address, again, another automated, and the theme that I will continue to come back to is this false distinction that you could not have speed without certainty. We restored speed and certainty. We made 6.1 million PPP loans in the same amount of time, same amount of months, but we did that with a fraud framework ahead of the E-Tran authorization. In addition, we've talked about the 4506T, which again, Congress corrected in the Economic Aid Act and we instituted. As it was mentioned in the IG findings in 2020, in the RER Rapid portal, borrowers were allowed to switch their bank accounts. That is a red flag for any financial service company. It is not something that is necessary for speed. And we restored preventing that from happening. And you see that actually in the comments regarding the ACH disbursements going over to Treasury and some of the challenges with banks flagging suspicious activity. In addition, we restored the rule of two and manual refuse for all false for all fraud flags related to individual loan files. This is particularly important because the IG referenced in the COVID idle program that there was bulk filings where despite having fraud flags fire on those particular loan applications, they were waved through in 2020. With specific to the PPP program and the challenges that were highlighted in 2020 there, specifically, the Secretary of the Treasury at the time required SBA to process E-Tran authorizations in real time. For any bank or financial service company or payments company, that is near impossible. There's 3 core accounting systems on planet Earth that banks use, Jack Henry, Fiserv, and SAS. I'm sure there are other brands, but those are the 3 that lead. They cannot process in real-time reconciliation. So by allowing E-Tran authorizations to be granted in real time, which they have never had been before and will not again, it led to 50,000 duplicate loans. In addition, there was bulk processing choices that were made in phase 2 that were provided to banks to move through, which the IG has correctly pointed out, led to a host of issues with respect to duplicate loans, as well as challenges with respect to the forgiveness, the loan calculations. I can keep going, but what I want to assure you, Senator Ernst, is that under Administrator Guzman and under the Biden-Harris administration, we have worked with the IG every day. The reason that this committee does have the data that Chairman Cardin has talked about on both programs, on all programs, is because unlike our predecessors who went to court to block the access for the American people to the data of the programs, we have made all data available. So it is absolutely the case that we will continue to prioritize fraud, waste, and abuse. It is something that we do not have to sacrifice speed. So I want to assure the borrowers out there, back to my points about am I approved and when do I get my money, you can go fast in the 21st century, but you can go fast with sensible controls all through automated. And the last thing I'll say on this particular point with respect to PPP is that we put in, beginning in January of 2021, for 6.1 million PPP loans, a fraud control framework, which enabled us to validate all manners of eligibility and compliance, as well as know your customer principles of individual identity and business identity. So before you could get a PPP3 second draw or first draw loan, just whether or not the bank or the non-bank lender ran a fraud protocol, the agency ran that fraud protocol. And but for the holds that we placed on loans, that lenders needed to work with us and borrowers needed to work with us to overcome, where we did manual reviews depending on the issue. Those things went through fast. And again, there were 5.1 million loans in 2020, no controls, in 6 months. 6.1 million loans in 2021 with controls. So the thing that I've been looking forward to talk to, and I appreciate this opportunity today, is that speed and certainty can coexist. You can do emergency relief. And the last thing I'll say on behalf of the civil servants at the SBA, which is really important for them, is that you would be hard-pressed to find an IG or GAO report ahead of 2020 that has fraud, waste, and abuse featured prominently in it. There are improper payments, for sure, meaning the lender made a mistake on the eligibility or some type of rule, but you'd be hard-pressed to find that fraud, waste, and abuse. So 2020, there were choices made to prioritize speed at all cost that, in my opinion, did not need to be made and are the outlier event that has caused the challenges that we all regret. And I say that completely admiring the prior administration, both Congresses, everybody that's been involved, because PPP and COVID EIDL were unbelievable programs to help Main Street small businesses. But it's absolutely the case that fraud, waste, and abuse is a huge priority and will continue to do that. Mm-hmm. So thank you for indulging me.
Yes, no, and I appreciate that. And I do hope once the fraud, waste, or abuse has been identified, then we go that next step of either prosecution or recoupment. Mm-hmm. So again, I'll go back to my opening statements as well. We do know that there was an error made with Planned Parenthood and the affiliation rules. So, but we haven't seen any attempt to recoup those dollars. So, is one thing that we can identify it, but then to actually go back and correct the problem, I think that is really important, because whether it's PPP or the EIDL program, the loan program, obviously there are still those that have applied that would like to see those dollars. in their businesses. So one way or another, and we can come back to that. Certainly, I'll have some follow-on questions because I do know that you have a fraud risk management board, which is good. So I'll want to know a little bit more about that as well. But thank you very much, Mr. Chair.